Hello and welcome to episode 238 of the Crate and Crowbar podcast, coming to you live, or not live, pre-recorded on the 9th of May. I remember how to do this extremely well. I'm Marsh Davis, a special guest returning from the grave, joined by...
Oh, Philippa, hi. Pip.
Me, Chris Thurston, hello.
Perfect.
Tom Francis, hello.
I didn't mean to sing out Chris is perfect there. Obviously, you're all perfect. But
A fantastic intro.
thank you. It's been a while, but I'm back.
Yeah,
for
welcome.
one single episode.
Welcome back to your home, this podcast.
Thank you. It's literally in my home. Although it feels a lot more homely now that I've not been living in it, and unreal humans have been inhabiting it for a period of time and making it feel nice.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what actual human warmth looks like. I've not experienced
It's
that.
funny, you and I lived here for 2 years without getting anywhere near that.
Yeah.
I remember I fixed the skirting board once and you both just looked at me like, what are you doing?
Well, it's important to note that during the time that me and Marsh lived here, that the only people who were capable of fixing anything in the house was someone who possessed the omnipresent dad force. A power, a capability over screwdrivers and toolkits possessed only by dads. That came kind of hand in hand with a fondness for Top Gear and a love of jumpers. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but nonetheless it was true. And then you came along, Pip, and proved us all wrong by fixing that skirting board.
But I'm back and no skirting boards will be fixed this evening. While I was back in Bath, can I tell you my most Bathy anecdote since I've been back here?
Yeah.
Which is that I was in town and there was a man unloading stuff from the back of a Hygienic Air branded van, and he was wearing a Hygienic Air branded hoodie. And while he was doing this, he not only sneezed, but farted. And I was like, that's British irony perfectly, and that's why I came back to this country. Then I held my breath and walked past.
Did he sneeze and fart at the same time?
There was like a second difference between it, but it was a real kind of 1-2 punchline, you know? It was
Sort of like when you see the lightning and then you hear the thunder.
Yeah. Or he has one of those like Diablo perks. Like one can proc off the other. Good. There's once again, as there was last week, basically no video game news as far as I understand. However, I did make you all just watch the trailer for a video game called Atomic Heart, which could be described as sort of Bioshocky, a little bit stalkery, but not in a weird way. I mean, in the style of the video game Stalker. Also a little bit Nier Automata in the manner of its big round robots. But looks really rad, I thought.
Yeah.
Tom?
Extremely visually lavish and full of interesting character designs and like really offbeat stuff. A very horror vibe, but also really bright and colourful, which is an interesting combo. I felt like a lot of the trailer felt like a sort of visualization of like a, target previs thing where they've hit this, here's what we're going for with the gameplay experience. Cause it had that telltale thing of like when someone's running, there's this sort of beautifully scripted motion to it that you never get when you're actually in control because, the person making the scene knows where the character's going to go. So they know how to like have their movements anticipate that. There are a couple of little clips where like they're firing a machine gun or, moving around a space that did definitely look like they were being controlled by WASD or a gamepad. But yeah, it looks like, a lot of it, I couldn't really imagine, like, how am I playing this? Because it seems like a scripted scene.
Lots of moments of what is clearly the kind of moment in Bioshock where you pick up a gun for the first time and your character goes, wow, look at that, and turns it over very kind of like, very much in their own face.
And there were the ends of QTEs as well,
Yeah.
where they ripped out robot faces and stuff. But not that much stuff about what it would be like to get between those 2 points. But that's not really a bad thing. I mean,
at the end, they like zoom out and show like a map that sort of seems to be implying it's open world, which I can't quite believe. It looked, up until then, it looked much more like a sort of directed experience. So either it is a directed experience and that map is slightly misleading, or they want it to be an open world game, but they haven't made it yet.
Yeah, because in between there is sort of like spooky corridor, robot clown horror, zombies, perhaps, drones from Half-Life, but designed a decade later, a park of some description.
Pines?
A big round robot who has rocket butt cheeks. There's
all the things that you want.
Exactly.
Really.
Like, just a big full checkbox of every noun that there is. Pip, what did you make of it?
It was like watching a first-person shooter having a dream. Like, every now and again it would just slam you back to the first-person shooter perspective and you'd just be like, okay. And then it would just suddenly go off on one, like, oh, okay, right, this is what you would like to encapsulate.
What if a robot clown was vomiting an infinite cable?
But then it kept doing that thing of showing you, like a person who is making sure that a gun looks the same from both sides. Which, I mean...
Or can't find the safety switch.
I was caught out once by the guy who wrote, "You're a dickhead" on the public facing side of my gun, and I will never be caught out by that again.
Or it's checking that it's really that shiny. So, but I mean, and that was a bit like, I guess that's the thing that makes me think, I'm not sure I believe all of the other things that you are saying to me right now, because... You know, if the thing that actually looks like its gameplay footage is looking like BioShock, I'm kind of like... I mean, it's nice to have a vision, but it's, you know, it's like with the Red Dead Redemption 2 trailer. I was like, well, that's an interesting, you know, or not an interesting, but that's a short film that I just watched.
No, I enjoyed listening to all of your opinions on the Red Dead trailer last week, because it had exactly the flaws that you picked out. Obviously, that it was just not a lot of what you'll actually be doing in it. And I don't know, is this going to be a trend for video game trailers? Do people, are there like the verbs of video games just so kind of well known that people, the PR and marketing departments are just like, yeah, the gamers will know that that's what they're going to be doing, so let's show them all the other stuff?
Maybe it's just not the point in the rollout where they show you the gameplay, right? Like, because this trailer had, like, they did a tease of the announcement for the like, it was one of those things of like, oh, we're gonna tell you the date on this date. It was, you know, it's those Russian dolls of announcements, you know, where you sort of, how far back can you get from the real meat of the game while still maintaining people's interest or coverage or hype or whatever else. And so, you know, I guess, and it seems to work, so I guess it'll be right up until it stops working. So
yeah, I mean, going by the audience of one of my barber, he was very excited about the Red Dead Redemption trailer. Clearly, it didn't matter that it didn't show gameplay footage. He was well up for it.
Well, your hair is looking on fleek, I believe. So, you know.
Good, it didn't distract him too much.
No, I'm not sure whether that's a phrase that is entirely limited to eyebrows or indeed young people, so, but I don't know.
Nonetheless, Marsh's head does look like just one big cowboy hat.
Yeah, it's really impressive to cut my hair in the shape of a sombrero, but he gave it a good go.
Yeah, there's a bit in the Atomic Heart trailer that I respect, where they show what is a good gosh darned attempt at a hype moment for a weapon customization menu that is completely out of place in what is otherwise a very showy trailer. But almost that gives me faith in the whole project, because if they are equally excited about the ability to spray paint a cool eggshell blue skull on the side of your shonky machine gun, then they must have almost no sense of the relative value of different parts of their game.
But is it not just, no, it's okay, fellow friends. This contains microtransactions.
I don't think so. I think it's so much as like, it's a moment of like, look, a menu. This is a game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think maybe I've just spent too much time having to look into Steam skins trading for like CSGO. I've just become massively jaded on the front of like things being slightly different colours.
But nonetheless, it was a nice surprise, I thought, because it came out of absolutely nowhere. I had no idea it was a thing, and now it's sort of like, Well,
it's nice to see a shooter with some sort of visual imagination, I think. You know, I mean, it is striking that it has like a sense of humour that it conveys within a very short space of time. Actually, it wasn't that short. It was like a 3-minute trailer. How the hell did we manage to sit through to the end of a 3-minute trailer?
No, it was the Witcher thing was 3 minutes. This was only 1.5, I believe.
We tried to watch we accidentally on purpose watched a fake fan trailer for the network's Witcher series but not starring Mads Mikkelsen. I don't know why we watched this, except
It was
we
up
sort
next.
of thought it
We're
might be real.
victims of the algorithm.
We got clickbaited. It was like, oh, really? Is that a thing? No.
We also
now
started
we're
drinking
here.
early, which is maybe the
Yeah,
explanation for many things.
I almost watched a Grammarly advert for Hugh Mads.
I will say that, like, there are a lot of things about it that just seem to have that.
Are we talking about Atomic Heart or Mads
Atomic
Mikkelsen's The
Heart?
Witcher?
I'm not going anywhere near that because I have no thoughts. But there's a sort of joyous sort of embracing of over-the-topness and perhaps silliness that Atomic Heart had that I think is often missing from games. They sort of tend to go straight for the gritty or at least, like, shooters have a very specific tone at the moment, maybe, and I have missed the sort of slightly wonky 6 to 7 out of 10 projects. And I know that that's going to sound so shady, but I genuinely love when things try and do stuff, regardless of whether they succeed or fail. I would so much rather see somebody just try and do something cool or interesting than, you know, the next safe option, right? So, yeah, hopefully that undoes anything that I said earlier that didn't sound particularly excited.
I think there's also, like, a race that we didn't realise was happening to who can do the best thing where, like, a big egg full of drones hatches and all these drones come out, but it's scary. Because that's been a race that Viktor Antonov has been racing against himself since the early noughties. And it feels good to have, like, a different batch of artists.
Egg race.
Yeah, exactly. Take on that challenge of, like...
But without spoon.
The egg and drone race.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Nonetheless, a video game. It happened.
Well done, video games.
We should talk about something that we've been playing.
Can I talk about some stuff?
Yeah.
Because I think my comments are going to be mostly unfocused.
That's fine.
And gibberish, so we might as well get them out of the way early and then move on to...
Is that not what the
matters
latter
of
half of
substance.
the podcast is for?
Well, we did the podcast in reverse today because me and Chris went to the pub beforehand,
Oh,
so
yeah, of
I'm going to be
course.
slowly getting more sober across the podcast, right?
What's in that glass there, Marty?
It's Ribena. It's gin and tonic. It'll be fine. But I've been playing games you've already talked about on the podcast.
Excellent.
I've been playing lots of different things. So, like, my PC was broken for ages, and I finally got it back. So I had to kind of like, a period of debauchery where I just played all kinds of things. And I played a whole bunch of games that I played 10 years ago and have just been released. So amongst them is a game you'll probably talk about later, Spy Party. But I also played Gorogoa, which seems like exactly the same game that I played, I don't know, 7 years ago, maybe? I don't exactly know.
You commissioned my first piece of writing for PC Gamer, and it was Gorogoa.
Holy shit.
There you go.
I do believe.
It's a fun game. I like it. And I also played Iconoclast, which was also an identical game. 7, maybe. In fact, I think I played that like right at the beginning of my game journalism career, like 9 years ago or something like that. It seems functionally identical, but it's now out, and I don't know if it's selling well, but it should, because it's actually quite a sweet platformer with, you know, like an interesting narrative aspirations on top about religion and the way that religion forms around strange events in the world. So it's like it supposes, I think humanity has crash landed on another planet, and there's certain kinds of origins of power that future humanity has developed, and that's kind of fallen into mythology, and the kinds of cultures that emerge many generations after that are quite well thought out, and all that stuff is just on the fringes of what is quite a satisfying Metroidvania platformer. But aside from that, I've also been playing Far Cry 5, which you may have heard about on the Crazy Crowbar podcast. I don't have really anything to say about it. But
Is it, do you like it?
nah.
Right. Well, we covered the basics then.
I kind of do, but what struck me about it is how unimportant that world is to Far Cry 5, but also all Far Crys, on the basis that they've made the same Far Cry 4 times now, including Far Cry Primal. And really it's the same thing, but it's in slightly different places, and those places don't matter at all. And I think in the past you kind of tricked yourself into thinking that the environment matters, because you spend quite a lot of time there. But in this one, everything is so aggressive, and you're constantly being distracted by things that really where you are doesn't matter at any second during that game. There's no part of it where you sit down and you think, wow, this is a really interesting place with a history. And it made me think about how you appreciate environments both in games and also in reality. Because I played a lot of Assassin's Creed Origins as well, and that game was like a sightseeing game for me. I went to a lot of different places in it, and I sat down, I spun around a bit, and I was like, make me feel something about this environment. And sometimes it did, and most of the time it didn't. And then I realized maybe I'm asking too much of games, because I really don't feel that way about anything in life. And like, I can go and see a beautiful sunset. I'll probably be spinning around in reality saying, make me feel something. I won't. So maybe it's not Far Cry's fault, but I think it is also Far Cry's fault. And those are my feelings about Far Cry 5.
You hate sunrises.
No, I really like them. It's just, I wish I felt something. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do actually really know what you mean. I felt this way about Ghost Recon Wild Lads.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a game fundamentally about a gorgeous active environment art. Very extensive active environment creation across vast teams. It made me feel nothing at all. And there's a sort of vicarious, guilty thrill in that almost, in feeling nothing about what is obviously such a skilled and labour-intensive active world building.
Yeah, it feels wasteful. And I think Far Cry is the worst waste of it. Like, I think Assassin's Creed, they try a lot to make you care about those environments. So, like, you might go to the Temple of Sobek, for example, and that place has a history, and it's a temple, and it has, like, that kind of innate resonance that I think anybody has. So, like, you see a sculpture of a man with a crocodile's head, and for some reason that kind of taps into some deep-rooted
fear of crocodile men.
But it's also instantaneously, like, supernatural and above what you experience as a human, generally speaking. And it's you're seeing effigies of humans, but in some way elevated or more powerful, and that's intoxicating in some way. Like, you instantly recognize that this has some kind of religious power to it, even if you don't subscribe to that religion, right? And those places are not only seeded with that meaning, but they're also places that you explore physically. And there's obviously other shit narrative stuff that they seed into those environments, generally speaking. But in Far Cry 5, I've not really encountered any of that stuff. You'll find, like, a note on a counter, and you'll be like, I accidentally clicked on that. I'm sorry. Cancel this. And then, like a badger will attack you or something. And that's really your only interaction. Like, they've wasted the efforts, I feel, to some extent, of those environment designers in a way in which they've tried to avoid wasting those efforts in nearly every other game that Ubisoft has made with that same format, because a lot of Ubisoft games are now built around that same massive open world, lots of quest icons thing.
So,
and like,
no, I would say from, like, having listened to, because I haven't played it, I haven't watched it, I haven't cared about Far Cry. I mean, it's just not for me at all. And so I've only really heard about it from other people, but from what they've said, there's just no tonal variation. There's no, pacing. It's just, it's always just, I'm going to throw things at you. Please don't leave. Like, this is stuff you have to deal with it immediately. And it reminded me of, there's a Netflix show called Nailed It. And it's like, it's the
this
most
is a very good comparison.
Colourful, brash, shouty thing where essentially it is just people shouting at the camera trying to make gifable moments of, I think they're just not very good bakers trying to replicate actual, like, good cakes and, trying to produce cake wreck style humour out of it. But it's just so worried that you might stop watching that it can't leave you alone, and that actually makes you want to stop watching because there's no chance to have any variation of experience. There's no breathing room, there's no pacing.
It feels very monotone by being kind of, like, aggressively diverse, which is weird.
I actually found this one, so I did find Primal to be different to the rest of the series, as you well know if you listen to this podcast. And it was partly because, like, there are no vehicles in that, so you can't get around quickly. Like if you want to get from one place to another, you walk through a forest of like animals that can easily kill you. This one feels like the polar opposite in that not only are there vehicles and there are planes and they're easy to get to, there's also a perk you can get, which means you can already fast travel, but when you fast travel, you also start in the sky, wingsuiting down, so that you can get to basically anywhere. Like you just fast travel to somewhere that's vaguely near where you want to go, then you wingsuit. You can wingsuit about 2 kilometers or something. It's a vast distance, which is actually kind of good because I didn't care about the world like you. It was just a place. It was just like a surface on which the
outposts exist.
The emergent stuff existed, yeah. And so I was just like, get me to the next outpost. I can see there's some smoke there. I'm going to fly over there. And I want to get there as quickly as possible.
Did you feel the same way in the previous, Far Cry's that weren't Primal? Like, I mean, is there something about the American landscape at all? Is that culpable anywhere, or is it just the way it's presented that makes it less interesting?
It is the least interesting one to me. Like Far Cry 3 was a nice holiday in a tropical place. Far Cry 4 was Nepal, which is just, I haven't seen that particular kind of territory in a game before, and it's less like vibrant than some of the others, but I sort of liked it for that. It was very mountainous, had all this vertical difference which let you use the wingsuit loads, and so I kind of liked that. And then, yeah, this is the least interesting world they've done. And it's pretty enough, but it's just...
I wish I was allowed just to mooch around in it a little bit more. Like, I wouldn't take much, just like a few seconds where I'm not being attacked by whatever the honey badger equivalent is in
Wolverine,
America.
I think
Wolverine, yeah, there you go.
Tiny little Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'll pursue it any further, which is kind of sad because I feel like, you know, there's obviously a huge amount of effort's been poured into this world. And I just can't engage with it, really. It's just too much stuff happening. And occasionally you'll go and you'll like there's some kind of little puzzle areas you go to where you need to flip on power in certain places and then maybe navigate some electrified water in order to get to a stash. But those are just so Spartan in comparison with the rest of the game. I don't know. Yeah,
I had a great moment with it recently. With my favorite thing about it, the companions, like not the story ones, but just the generic dudes you can pick up. And I really like taking those under my wing and like leveling them up. And I had one, you can direct them to who you want them to attack. And we're fighting some cultists, and I basically wanted to like level up my companion. So I told him to go and attack the cultist. Cultist got back in his car and drove off. And I was heading back to my quad bike, and my companion ran ahead of me, got on the quad bike and drove off with it, chasing the guy I had told him to kill. Because it's just like, okay, I've got to kill this guy. Here's a vehicle. I'll take this. And so I was just left like running after both of them. Like, no, come back. And fair play to him.
One mission in life now.
He just drove along that quad bike, like firing all the guns he could at this thing, at this truck until it went off the road. And then when it went off the road, he hopped off the quad bike and shot the guy. And I caught up like wheezing. Thanks, I guess.
Yes, those are all the cries that I have to cry about Far Cry 5.
Tom, I believe you've been slaying the Spire.
Yeah, the third character is in there. Slay the Spire is the roguelike where you're also building a deck, and so each combat encounter you have like a hand of cards that do things like 6 damage to an enemy of your choice, or 5 block, which means on the enemy turn when they attack, you'll mitigate 5 damage. And you get to see what the enemies are going to do. And it's still in early access, and there have been 2 characters that have a kind of warrior-like one and a roguelike one. There's been a lot of speculation as to what the third one would be. A lot of people obviously thought mage, including me. But it's actually a kind of robot mage, which is excellent. And I've just been playing with that today, and it's awesome. They're so good at creating these mechanics that just can snowball and escalate in crazy ways, and they're just really interesting ways to use your deck to, or to build your deck to kind of exploit one particular mechanic, one particular thing. So I think they're called the Defect, the robot. It's a robot that's gone wrong. And its mechanic is that it has orbs. It's all about orbs. And I'm very excited about this. So you have like 3 orb slots. And you start with 1 lightning orb, and a lightning orb does 3 damage to a random enemy at the end of your turn all the time, and it will just stay there if you do nothing else. You have a card that says it evokes your current orb, then it will attack with the lightning thing, and it will just do more damage still to a random enemy. But then you can get like a frost orb, and that gives you 2 block every turn. Or if you evoke it, then it gives you 5 block. But then it's consumed in doing so. And then there's dark orbs. Let me tell you about the dark orbs. The dark orbs just have a damage value, but they don't deal it yet. It just builds every turn. They just add like another 6 damage every turn, and this damage value keeps ticking up. And when you finally evoke it, it does all of that damage to the weakest enemy in the fight. And so it's kind of a finisher thing. And the orbs are in kind of a queue, so it's the one at the front that will be evoked if you do anything that evokes things. So you have to kind of have a trade-off between, if you can amass lots of orbs, they're all doing these passive things all the time. But if you use one up, it does a more significant benefit right now, but consumes the orb. And just keep discovering cool mechanics with this. So you can, like, there's a card that gives you more focus, but reduces the number of orbs you can have. And focus means they're more effective. So if you play that, the ones you have get better, but you can't have as many. And then I've got a relic that gives me, every 2 turns, I just get a free orb slot. So the number of orbs I can have just keeps going up and up and up, out of control. Which is amazing, because eventually you could have, if every one of those was a block orb, I'm getting so much free block every turn, nothing can ever kill me. Or if everyone is a lightning orb, the enemy's taking so much damage every turn, it's probably going to wipe them all out. But I suddenly realized I got that, I was really excited about it, and then I realized that actually one of the things like those dark orbs, they're only any good when you evoke them. So first you have to evoke whatever's in your current slot, and then they move forwards, and then eventually when they're the front slot, you've got to evoke them. And there are cards that do the evoke thing, but I didn't have that many of them. The other way to evoke something is if you just gain another orb and there isn't room for it, it automatically evokes the current one. So if you have a dark orb in your front slot and you gain a frost orb, but you've got no room for it, then the dark orb happens, which is great. And I was gaining slots so quickly I couldn't do that anymore. Like, I always had free room for all the new orbs I was putting in, so I just kept gaining orbs forever without being able to evoke them. And so there's kind of like, it's sort of suggesting 2 different playstyles. One is like lean on the passives more and have loads of orbs at once, but not many ways to evoke them. Or you could focus on just a few and they're all really good. And it's easy to evoke them. And then there's a power that, gives you a big boost of focus, 4, which just means everything. Instead of doing like 3 damage per turn, the lightning orb, it does like 7 damage per turn. Which is kind of huge. And it gives you 4 focus now, but you lose 1 focus every turn for the rest of the fight. And so you're going to get worse, and you're going to start to get to the point where none of your orbs do anything at all. Like, they can just keep losing focus until they have no effect. And at that point, you're kind of lost. And so it's kind of asking you to bet on how long the fight's going to last. Like, if you think you can close it out in the next, like, well, if you close out in 4 turns, then this has no disadvantage. It's just a huge boost now, a slightly less boost next turn, slightly less boost next turn, and then in 4 turns you'll be back to where you were. If it's going to go on for like 8 turns, in 8 turns you're going to be useless. And so I used it once. I did screw it up. I just kept losing focus until none of my orbs did anything, and I almost was able to see the fight out, but not quite. And then, so that's a kind of interesting betting thing. And then I found another one. So I can do that twice now. So it's like this thing where previously it was just a gamble of like, if I think I'm in the closing phase of the fight, or if I think I will be with this extra boost it's going to give me, then I should do it. And now it's like, well, I have 2, so I could just do it now. And I'm sure by the time I start to like decrepify myself, I'll have another one to keep me going. And it's become like a drug addiction thing.
Oh, wow.
Like the power is so useful that you keep telling yourself, I'm sure I'll get the right card I need to keep myself going, and I won't become...
How knowable is that situation, though? Like, is the possibility space enough that you can make it kind of assured bet? Or
it is. You start with a deck of like 15 cards, and then you keep adding to them. Like, after every fight, you get to add a card. And if you have poor self-restraint like me, you always do it. So your deck gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you end up with like 42 cards. And at that point, you have no idea what you're going to have in like 6 turns, because it's random. But if you have a small enough deck, then you have more control, but also you have fewer cards. And you start with a bunch of very basic, not powerful cards. So as you get good ones, they can just be mixed in with your deck, and then you have some bad cards and some good cards, which leads to a lot of variance. Or you can take every opportunity you get to lose cards from your deck, but that, at a card shop, you can either buy new cards or you can pay to get rid of existing cards. So it's a separate thing that, like, the opportunities to do that are limited. And if you turn down all new cards and only spend all of your opportunities to get rid of old cards, you can have a tiny deck, but that obviously you don't have as many good things either.
There's that thing that card games are essentially just mechanics, the game, right? Like, what you're engaging with is a sort of a kind of pure system design in a way.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like Slay the Spire is just sort of like a bottomless well of those kinds of things? Because I know that, like, Tom Senior has also fallen deep into it on that grounds, right? Like, you can just keep kind of interacting with these things forever. Or do you think, is there anything about the way that it constructs its kind of dungeon run kind of thing that kind of has like a logical end point or a kind of ideal form?
No, I think it is a kind of a bottomless well because of the roguelike element, the fact that it's random. After every fight you get offered 3 cards and you pick one of them or none of them. And that means you have just enough control that you always think you can get the card you want or you can build the deck the way you want to, but actually the random element is pretty strong.
I think that's pretty much exactly what Alex said the first time he talked about it on the podcast.
Yeah.
It was that kind of like that just enough control, the sense that you have and that you will just keep trying or investing. Or
And it means when you get dealt a bad hand, there's always a way to say, but if your deck was better, there would have been something good in this hand. I personally think the random element is too strong. I would rather it was a little more controllable and solvable, but the fact that it isn't is probably going to give it its longevity and probably make it more successful ultimately because it's more addictive. Basically, it's more like gambling.
I feel like the too much randomness argument is something that I have heard attached to every single card-based or deck-building-based game in existence.
Yeah, it is kind of the point. But I at least know that if I got less randomness, or if I got the thing I'm asking for, it would give the game a shorter shelf life. I would get bored of the game sooner, but I think I'd have a better time in the meantime, and I would rather have something that's like short and sweet than I keep playing it forever because I'm always sure this time I'll get enough orb slots to do my ultimate thing that I'm planning.
Do you know what the future of the game is? Are they just going to carry on releasing these things indefinitely? What's the plan?
This is the last character before they finish the game. You get it out of early access, but they plan to add more afterwards, or more characters. It's taken them quite a long time to do this character, and I can see why, because every character has their own deck. There are, they all have basic attacks and basic defense, but other than that, all the cards are unique to the class. And even a lot of the relics you find, which are like the passive buffs, are unique to the class as well. So it's all like, it must be a nightmare to balance. Like they want you to exploit it and they want you to find the loopholes. So they must have to think pretty carefully about which ones they create.
It's interesting because that kind of random element or the gambling element is something I've been thinking about a bunch. What I've been playing, or at least a couple of hours of, is City of Brass. I don't know if you've encountered this yet, Tom, because
I've heard of it.
Directly relevant to anyone who likes Spelunky, basically. Because what it is an attempt to render a kind of Spelunky experience in first person, basically.
Oh, is this Brass Balls?
Yes. Okay. It's called City of Brass. But if you remember that it's Brass Balls, then that's fine.
Oh, you know what? When you first said this, I was thinking of Brass Tactics, which is the VR game.
That's the VR strategy game. Right. Yeah, no, City of Brass is the first person. I was going to say a roguelike, but I imagine people who are super into roguelikes would take issue with that. It's a rogue-esque video game experience by, I think, some former BioShock developers. It looks beautiful, and it's a sort of first-person. So it's a first-person adventure kind of combat game. Set in a kind of Arabian Nights city.
Yeah, I do know this. I've seen some.
And it's a roguelike in the sense that if you die, you have to go back to the beginning. And you learn patterns. And it's very sort of, it's a really, I really like it. And I've only played a couple of hours, and it seems pretty long. Like I've played, like a couple of hours of it, like a dozen runs or so, and there are daily challenges and stuff, and I've been trying them. And I'm yet to beat a boss. And as far as I can tell, like a successful run involves beating like 5 bosses and then a final boss, each boss arriving after 3 levels. So I suck is basically what I'm saying. And also I'm at the kind of, beginning of a learning curve. And it does let you kind of like apply modifiers to make things easier or harder, but it's not like, something like Rogue Legacy or Dead Cells where every run you do is giving you a benefit for the next one. You're not like leveling up your character tremendously. It's much more in the Spelunky mold of like, oh, you understand something about this environment now. Okay, reapply it. And it feels a little bit to me like those early days of Spelunky did, where getting to the first level of the jungle felt like this was a good day.
Yeah.
And then like 200 hours later, that's a bad day. Like, or you're getting to a much more granular understanding of how much health you should have by that point. But it's pretty cool. So its main kind of, mechanic, I guess, is, so you have a sword in one hand and a whip in the other. And the whip has two modes, which are basically push and pull. So every enemy can either be whipped in the head with the push option to stun them, or pulled with the alternate fire to drag them towards you. And this interacts in a kind of free-form way with loads of different environmental traps, from like trapdoors to spike traps to sand blowy things, to like explosive barrels to flame barrels. There are also like pickups like bombs and vases like in Spelunky, and ghost chickens that distract skeletons.
The standards.
Yeah, which can be either picked up, or anything you can pick up, you can also pick up by whipping it towards you. So the whip kind of has that kind of utility as well. And it's super like neat watching it all come together, because like when I started playing it, I worried that it didn't have like it feels like a game that requires like a killer weapon, like a weapon you want to use every single time. But actually, after a while, with a bit of finesse, the whip kind of becomes that, because you get really cool moments where like you have these little zombies that don't have arms, that when they see you, they scream and their head ignites in blue flame and they charge at you. But if you whip them at the right moment, you can send them kind of careening off course into like a spike trap or something, and that feels really cool. Or you can whip a vase into your hand and then like lob it at them to take them out of action. There are tougher zombies that you can kind of disarm by whipping different parts of their body, like whipping the sword out of their hand and stuff. But you can also just drag them into a big hole or whatever. And there are sort of like ceiling kind of grapple hook points where you can whip to kind of fling yourself into the air. So there's loads of room for finesse in a way that's kind of neat. And the bosses seem to make good use of that. Like, it took me a while to figure out that the first boss archetype I was encountering did require me to kind of like whip her own magic lightning balls back into her shield in a kind of very kind of action game boss fight kind of way. And then on the way, you're also picking up treasure constantly and spending that at shops for kind of upgrades to your equipment, like a whip that knocks people further away, or if you get hit by an enemy, you freeze nearby enemies, and there's all that kind of mechanical layer on top of it as well. And it's super like interesting, like how it does and doesn't adapt the kind of Spelunky experience into first person. I feel like first person's a less successful vector for slapstick. Like, I've been knocked into a very deep hole several times, but you don't necessarily like see it happen the same way you do when it's your little Spelunky character kind of getting batted backwards by a kind of unexpected arrow or something. Often things can kind of come at you from unexpected quarters and you're just dead, which is fair, but also sort of like has less of that kind of sort of like, oh shit moment that you necessarily get in Spelunky. But it does work. It's super cool. I think it's kind of like, it's sort of crept out of early access this month, I think, without huge fanfare that I've seen, but it's really well produced, really, really nice looking game as well. And I would definitely recommend people check it out.
Imagine if whips picked up things in real life. The whole cowboy dynamic would be just totally different. Like, they'd be picking up horses all the time. It would be really
putting them in the inventory.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? How, like, because I swear there have been some films, sort of 80s, kind of not necessarily the most woke things, but where, you know, the hero has, you know, put his whip out to bring a lady toward him.
It's true.
So
it does happen.
I mean, I have no idea if that would work in real life, or if you would just end up with like, did you just whip me? It's like, that's a crime.
You don't want to accidentally use the push function on your whip for that.
No, that's right click. You only use Q.
Okay.
I wonder, to go back ever so slightly, because my thoughts are apparently glacial, whether the Far Cry problem of things just happening so much makes it more YouTube friendly, because that you can be assured that you boot it up and you have an encounter. Like, there is something happening on screen.
Oh, yeah,
than,
that's probably true.
Dead air time.
I bet they thought about that. Yeah.
We can move back on to the other stuff now.
No, it's a good... How do you feel about say this bad, Pip?
But, well, wait 20 minutes and then I'll let you know.
What are the other weapons in the City of Brass?
So I initially thought that it was just like sword and whip all day, but actually so there are different forms of whip, but they don't seem to I haven't felt the difference quite so much as you would necessarily Spelunky. But I have managed to swap out the sword for like a big, slow, heavy sword, which does feel kind of meaningfully different. You can get a rapier, like a kind of quick jabbing sword, which is better in certain situations, but does less damage. You can get a torch that sets enemies on fire and means to take damage over time. So suddenly setting loads of skeletons on fire and then kiting them by keeping them away at the whip kind of becomes a strategy.
Could you get 2 whips and one pulls and one pushes and it rips things in half?
Or just turns them round.
Yeah, indeed.
I can rotate anybody.
No, it's very strict.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
It's still in early access, so,
It's not actually anymore.
Oh,
they
it's not
fucked
in
it.
early access, yeah.
You can't infinitely whip spin people, so they missed that.
Yeah. Well, it's probably why I hadn't heard of it till the other day.
Yeah, I think there's something about it that doesn't strike me as immediately arresting as something Spelunky, but I almost struggle to articulate exactly why. It's funny because I think it's partly a perspective thing, but also you sort of learn these sort of idiosyncrasies of these different enemy types. It does the same thing of sort of with each world or zone, there's a new sort of foe to kind of figure out. And it does a laudable thing, which is that to a tremendous extent, like Spelunky, actually, it's kind of about just avoiding things sometimes. You kind of assume you have to fight every skeleton in a room, but often just getting to the exit with as much treasure as possible is the win. Because there are stores on the way and you can buy gear and then just keep moving. But yeah, I didn't necessarily get the feeling that, it didn't have that sort of, I don't know, I'm really trying to figure it out. I think it partly might be because of the kind of Arabian Nights theme that binds everything together. There's not a sense of what's next in quite the same way. I say you progress from kind of world to world, but it is variations within a theme. But that is quite a hair-splitting criticism, I think, of what's actually a pretty cool. Because I've not seen anyone try and adapt that precise experience to first person before. And it's really solidly designed as a kind of first person combat game.
But maybe that is the thing, because when, so obviously having heard Tom and Alex both say that thing about Slay the Spire, where you have that feeling of, oh, but I could have done this thing differently, right? And Spelunky does that by having that side-on perspective where you, even if you couldn't have done anything to avoid it or couldn't have done anything differently because you are a bad player, which is me, you still see the arrow just before it hits. You still know you're going to die, and there is part of your brain that thinks, well, I've learned from that as a good human with a brain. And you're like, I haven't, but I've tricked myself into thinking that I did, and that the next run will be oh so different because now I know that bat might happen.
Yeah.
There's definitely a thing with City of Brass where, I feel like every time I've made meaningful progress with it is because I've gotten better at it, which you'd assume is a very honourable trait for your game to have from a design perspective. It's my progress is gated by my own understanding of its systems and my ability in the moment to execute the things I understand in a kind of effective way. What it doesn't have is that random layer of, in this run, I got this thing super early and therefore I'm overpowered now. I haven't seen that yet. I've never really, occasionally when you start, there's more or less treasure near the beginning of the map, but that necessarily has a relationship with whether you find a shop early on. It's very granular, which is probably very fair and very kind of balanceable because you can give the player more gold and have them become more cautious waiting for an opportunity to spend it, or give them less and have them feel like this run doesn't necessarily mean as much. But it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that roll the dice and see how this run's going to go thing that similar games have. But that really does feel like splitting hairs necessarily. It was interesting to try and get at why these sorts of experiences do and don't kind of compel you to keep playing.
Yeah.
I bought it last week when it came out and I do really like it. And I found myself playing it for half an hour to an hour a day, do the daily challenge, play a couple of times and then put it down, which is actually quite a happy position for a game like that to occupy. It's only 15 quid or something. It's kind of worth it for that.
Something that seemed to do something almost Spelunky-esque in first person was Devil Daggers. Like, people seem to have that same relationship with it, even though they were obviously very different prospects.
Yeah.
It's an interesting comparison. I agree, Marsh.
Eldritch was also another first-person roguelike-ish thing.
Was Tower of Guns another one? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I think I played that for a little bit. I played, not first-person, but I played Cave Blazers a lot, and at first that really felt like, oh my god, this is just as good as Spelunky, but with a bunch of new toys and loads more items to find and all this stuff. And eventually I lost interest in it, and it was because of a random element, but one that happens quite a way in, which is the first boss you encounter. All bosses are just randomly chosen from a list of, I don't know how many, like 8 or 10 or something. And their difficulty is wildly different. Like, they sort of require different sets of equipment to defeat, but much more influential is just like, some of them are just balls hard and some of them are really easy. And so that just always felt like the success of my run is entirely down to that one dice roll, and it happens like half an hour in. Well, not half an hour, but like 15 minutes in maybe, after you invested loads of effort into it, and then it can just screw you. Just like, oh, sorry, today you got the boss that can't be defeated.
Yeah, I like, so far, every time I've hit the first boss in City of Brass, it's been the same boss, which feels fair, but I'm bad at it. Which, there's an interesting relationship between fairness and gambling, right? That is, like, kind of hard to unpick what's right and what's wrong, because I think City of Brass is tremendously fair, but I'm happy to throw one run at it a day and not go back constantly, because I don't have the sense that next time it's going to be tremendously different. Like, I enjoy it enough to keep playing, but I'm not waiting for it to make itself easier simply on the roll of the dice, which is a degenerate thing to want from a game. So
maybe it's that like fuzzy sort of grey area where you can, where you can't quite distinguish what is progress through skill and what's progress through the game's RNG. And so you can kind of choose to attribute it to yourself when you do well or to the game when you do badly, and being able to switch back and forth between those two things mean that you do want to put the next one in because you want the scenario where you were skilled and beat the thing, rather than the one where the game screwed you over because that particular thing happened. I don't know.
I should stress, though, and maybe to wrap up, because I feel like I kind of dug into the weeds on quite like a complicated aspect of designing a game designed to be repeated. But actually, it's very fun to whip a skeleton into a big spike. Like that is just a good interaction. It's good for everybody except the skeleton.
Good for all one of the people who aren't the skeleton in this interaction.
Exactly. Like, there's, you go, wha-cha, and the skeleton goes, shit. And then it's over for them. And that's great.
It almost sounds a bit like Dark Messiah of Might and Magic in terms of the environmental hazards.
Yeah, it does. And there's some good, like, it has good sort of, the things it respects from Spelunky is like the importance that everything be sort of physicsy. So, which is definitely what game designers call it. Everything's all big on physics. And so if you decide to whip the explodey barrel, then sometimes that's going to set off the fire barrel, which will set something on fire, which will fling across the level, and that'll set a different skeleton on fire. And sometimes it'll hurt you, and you don't know why, because you're viewing it in the first person, it's not that transparent. But you sort of respect it. Because you respect that you pressed a button, and that made things fly around. And whatever happens as a consequence of that is something you kind of are proud to own.
Do you think if you had a third-person replay, it would be different?
That's interesting.
Yeah, maybe.
Probably still suck at the moment you died if you didn't know why.
Yeah.
But
if
you get to enjoy
see that last 10 seconds, maybe you would feel like you learned something then want to go back.
That's what kill cams do in multiplayer games in theory. In practice, I never find I am appeased by seeing the kill cam.
Oh,
I'm
that
often
man
more
could
angry.
see me. Yeah.
Like, what? Like, he wasn't even doing the right thing, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, like, I mean, like a lot of my deaths in City of Brass come from like trying to fight a tough enemy or a boss or something and jumping from side to side, and then like jumping sideways into a sand blowy trap that blows me down a big hole. And it like, I can see the mind's eye third person version of that where all those elements are visible, but in the moment it just feels like, I'm doing a fight. Why am I doing this? Oh no. And that's not as gratifying as it is in Spelunky, where you have that. It's almost like there's a brief moment of catharsis that happens like infinitesimally inseparable from the actual fuck up itself, which is like the kind of, it is the, and this is when he knew moment. It's like, you know, the sort of zoom in on, and now I like take my hands off the controller because I know I've already fucked it up. Whereas first person, that locked in viewpoint holds you in a hope position for just a little bit longer than a similar game would.
I do like that moment, actually, because I get it with Super Hexagon, because it's just kind of like, oh, thank God that's over. Like, I can stop using my brain. I just
Finally,
need
I
to
can
sit down.
die.
Good old video games. Things we love.
Yeah.
It's amazing the difference in our approaches to the world, I suppose.
Well, speaking of incredibly tense experiences that are ostensibly, but are also kind of a relief for when they end, but are also good.
I think I know where
This is a Spy Party segue.
It is a Spy Party segue. We've all played Spy Party, have we not?
Yep.
Yeah.
At some point.
Nice.
In different decades.
In the last 10 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Spy Party, which has been in development since 1643.
Yeah. Children have been born and now have opinions about Fortnite in the time that it has taken for Spy Party to...
The Scarlet Pimpernel Party, I believe it was called originally.
I believe, yeah, it's not life is, you know, like...
The Last Supper.
It's old.
Anyway.
Spy Party. So, I came to Spy Party after its actual release into early access, hilariously, after 10 years of development. Very
I think
recently.
it's only 9.5.
That still counts. But so Spy Party is a game where one player, it's a 2-player competitive multiplayer game where one player is a spy at a party, if you will entertain that notion for just a moment. Who has a number of secretive objectives to achieve, like bugging an ambassador, but which means actually putting a bug on them, not just annoying, just irritating an ambassador. Seducing...
Hey, ambassador, how about them Ferrero Rocher?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, spoiling out. Involves seducing somebody, which, if you're ever unsure what that actually meant, you'll be pleased to know. It just means walking up to them, saying absolutely nothing, and then walking away, and then awkwardly walking back, and then saying something equally meaningless, and doing this 3 or 4 times until they agree that they have been seduced. And I like to think that is a purely reflective of my own experience. It involves trying to discreetly swap a statue. What benefit this is to the spy organization you belong to, I'm not sure. There are three kinds of statue. Lionel Richie, Falcon, and Boobsy statuesque.
Statuesque.
I don't know what I mean. What do I mean?
Well, it's more like a kind of fertility idol, it looks like.
Yeah, okay.
Wait, is statuette the masculine then?
Statuette just means a small statue.
I guess they are all little, aren't they?
You can't have a boobsy Falcon, though.
Can't be done.
And you can't have a
Stop
boobsy Lionel Richie. Though God knows we've tried.
Exactly.
Didn't Lionel Richie make a sculpture in one of his music videos?
It is in the music video for Hello. A blind woman renders a Lionel Richie.
Oh yeah, that's it. She makes a statue of him. Right.
Yeah.
And this is that statue.
Simply,
It is not
notably.
actually a statue of Lionel Richie. It is a head that Chris has decided looks like the head from the Hello video.
It does look like the head from the Hello Richie. So, but like, this is how I remember them. Like, I spend a lot of time as the sniper in Spy
I
Party.
listened to a lot of this conversation earlier on
because
Skype while we were
I would be
playing.
going like Lionel Falcon, Lionel Falcon, trying to remember the order in which the statues are, because that's very important when you're the sniper. Sometimes it would be Boobs Lionel Falcon.
So it's an asymmetric...
It's his jazz name.
Lionel Falconboobs.
Yeah, so Okay, so it's an asymmetric 1v1 game. One of you is
Try
the
it.
spy
Do this better
at
for
a
me.
party trying to fulfill these different objectives, and each of them has different tells, and the other person is the sniper who is watching the building from outside and thus doesn't actually have perfect vision of everything that's going on, but can see a lot of the room and is also aware of some bits of information like particular characters. And so what the sniper is trying to do is to keep an eye out for those different tells, or for anybody who doesn't seem to be moving the way that an NPC would move. And the spy is trying to pass under the radar and avoid detection while doing these various things.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for explaining it in a way that I might be able to just edit in place of my explanation, which ended up deep in the Lionel weeds.
Anyway, there's actually a tutorial now, which is excellent, and it's really good fun. It really captures, personality in that game, because I think that you could hear that and think that it sounds quite systems driven, or quite sort of, okay, I'm looking out for this, this and this. They're, binary states maybe, or they're very specific things, but it's so nuanced, and some of it is just daft, but in a fun way, like if you're making contact with the double agent character, then both the spy and the sniper, when you do that, when you're standing in the same floor pad as them and you trigger the action, both of you hear the phrase banana bread. And I think that's because Chris Hecker was making banana bread at the time, or thinking about banana bread, and so just sort of incorporated that into the game.
I think it's like the secret phrase that you've got to say to the double agent to sort of trigger them, or to let them know whatever it is. But
you can fake banana bread as well.
You can. So yeah, there's a mechanic around that, like in that the sniper's listening out for it, and when he hears it, they know that the spy is in conversation with the double agent right now, unless they're saying it falsely. You can also just say it anytime, but you can only do that once. You can only fake banana bread once, so you have a limited number of times you can say the phrase banana bread. Because more than that, you just get kicked out of the party.
And it's also worth stressing that
shut up.
These kind of because Spy Party has pretty nice art for quite a lot of its characters.
Yeah.
With the exception of a few of them.
The
waiter, who is I feel that I'm profoundly relatable. He's kind of just like a low poly man in a world of
high poly
true Lionel Richie sculpture.
He is, yeah.
Party.
But it
is him I'm looking for.
Cool, diverse lineup as well.
That's the entire game, actually.
There's some twins. There's an elderly lady in an amazing cocktail dress. There's
one of them's Queen Elizabeth II, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, there are just so many kind of interesting.
The twins are identical, right?
Yeah.
So if the spy,
the twin so many times, thinking it was the spy, and
if the spy is one of the twins, I mean, isn't it just twice as hard? If
I don't know. I mean, maybe there must be some other way in which it's balanced. But as far as I can tell, being a twin is that is a good way to.
But I suppose it self-balances, because if all spies be the twin for that reason, then you have a pretty good shot.
I think weirdly, it hasn't really come up for me, because when I've been playing, for example, when someone's done the banana bread thing, one thing that you can do is you can low-light characters which you think are definitely not the spy, if you're the sniper. So you can just click to put them in a kind of, more muted colour palette, and then, you can start concentrating on the others. And I found that often I would, for various reasons, have removed one of those. Yeah. One of the twins relatively early, or they would just be moving in different parts of the room, and so it wouldn't actually be too confusing. So
yeah, I guess at the very least you could just highlight one of them right at the start, because there's multiple levels of highlight and low light, right? You can
well, there's neutral, which is just what the characters look like in general. There's low light, which puts them sort of in the shade, so you're sort of paying slightly less attention to them, and then there's highlight, which sort of puts them more visibly on your radar just by sort of...
Can you not double highlight? And
you can't.
No.
You used to be able to. There used to be a whole spectrum. You could go all the way from dim to completely black when you ruled them out.
No, at the moment it just seems to be
three states:
muted, neutral, and highlight, and then obviously you can sort of, you can do things like zoom in or whatever, but if you zoom in, you lose the sense of the whole space. So you sort of, it's that trade-off of detail versus, broader perspective.
And as a spy, you see the laser sight of the sniper, so you know where the sniper is looking, so you can tell when you're being watched.
Or you know where the central, point... Because I tried so many times to, throw Chris off the scent by pointing the laser somewhere else while, trying to look
and I could
round
totally
a corner.
tell when you were doing that as well.
Oh.
Because I do the same thing.
Oh. You were really bad at swapping statues. You were the worst.
Apart from that one time.
Worst. Yeah, when I told you my secret. And then you did it, and it worked.
Yeah, so actually, this is one thing I was going to say about balance with regard to the twins and things. One thing that's interesting about it is the maps are very different in terms of how they're kind of balanced. So the first one we played on today, Pip, was the pub map, where there are only 2 statues, one either side of the bar, and they're both kind of in the open as far as the sniper can see, and the sniper can see both of them at the same time. So, you only have to stop the spy once, right? The spy has 4 objectives at least to complete. As the sniper, you have the option to kind of just pick an objective to watch for. You could just keep an eye on the ambassador the entire time. But what makes sense kind of seems to vary from map to map, because we played that one, and yeah, you're right. I really did make a meal of trying to swap out that falcon. But actually, on another map, I think it's the veranda map, there are 4 sets of 2 statues, some of which are in quite complicated positions. And when we played it, I went as the sniper first, and I did my very quick, Lionel Boobs Falcon kind of pass through the level, and then very quickly realized that, hang on, Lionel Falcon, that's not correct. And I realized you'd already done it, so I knew to watch the ambassador, and then by watching the ambassador, I managed to catch you and snipe you.
I hate the ambassador.
Yeah, and then when I played it, because we kind of went straight back into the swap roles, I knew, hang on, in this map, swapping is really easy. Just go for it straight away. And it feels like that's kind of the way the game works competitively, is as you get a bit more experience with it. Yeah. The idea is that even though you have the same objectives, the priorities in which you kind of undertake them and how difficult they are is going to vary. I think it's the ballroom map, which is the one in the tutorial, where one of the 2, there are 2 sets of statues, and there's a conversation pad right in front of one of them. And if the NPCs happen to fill up that conversation pad, which they do randomly, then the statues behind them are really hard to see for the sniper. So you I think that's a big part of the game actually, is understanding the maps to that extent, even though you wouldn't think they'd make such a big difference, because it is ultimately just a room with people in. But there are those little specific factors in each one that sort of affect what strategies work and what don't. And that struck me as that was the moment where I kind of figure out there's actually quite a lot to learn here beyond simply how to do each objective.
There is part of the tutorial where he's teaching you how to spot the ambassador butt pat. I still can't see it. I know who the spy is at this point, because I got there by shooting every single person once until it told me that I'd got the right person.
It seems very similar to some of the other arm gestures.
I still can't see it. I have been through that part of the tutorial again and again, and
it's the magic eye butt pat.
I have spent
dolphin.
so much time, Tom, with my sniper sight zoomed in on that ambassador's buttocks, and I still can't see it.
Where's the pat?
That's the bug in the ambassador.
But do you actually like it?
I really, really like it.
Yeah, we had a great time.
I think partly that was because I was playing... So I liked it, or it's not that I liked it more, but I found it more of an enjoyable and equal experience playing it with Chris. Whereas when I went into the game for the first time after the tutorial and just was playing with a stranger on the server, even though they said that they'd only just started playing, they were so much better than me. And I don't know whether it's linked to your time in the game or the number of wins that you had, but there were different win conditions available. So it was things like, picking up, I think because the ones that we were playing, you had to complete all 4 of those sort of starter objectives on the map as the spy. But the one that I was sort of playing with this other person was that you had to complete, I can't remember, I think it was 3 of 5 of the things, and some of them were just you picked up a statue 3 times, And that was like, I didn't understand how to watch for that on some of the maps, because that just felt like such an easy win. So
Yeah.
And so that kind of thing, I'm not sure whether there will be a point at which I just can't see the tells, or I can't be, because I watched some of the competitive stream that they run each week, and that was beyond. And I saw people in the Twitch chat just being like, look, I've played this game for a while now and I couldn't follow that. You know, there were whole like chains of events that told people particular things. And I'm just like, that's a level beyond which I will never see the game. So yeah. How about you two? Did you?
I don't know. I feel like it wasn't ultimately not really for me. Like the concept seems really accessible. It's something you can pretty quickly explain to people if you're, you know, Pip rather than Chris, and then they'll understand it. But then the actual level it's played at, like you said, requires just a huge amount of kind of fairly abstract knowledge about what kind of AI behaviors are going to happen and what kind of weird animations are going to play. And none of that is really related to the fantasy of being a good spy. And so you just need to know all this shit before you're good at it. And like, I don't know, I kind of feel like my ideal version of that fantasy is either that the games last like maybe 30 seconds and it's really just, you're in there, you spot somebody, you shoot them, that's it, and you roll again, and you just keep on playing really, really short rounds, and it's incredibly kind of trivial and throwaway. Or like, you spend like an evening at a fucking party trying to work out who's the spy. You know, like Hitman style, more that kind of thing, and like the middle ground it's gone for. No, I mean that is an appealing fantasy which that game type serves, and the middle ground for me just doesn't really exist. Like, I don't really want to learn a whole bunch of how to walk like an AI in order to pass just some sort of test. That doesn't really do it for me.
Have you played it with friends, or was it with strangers?
I played it with Owen. It was really annoying because obviously
so
he instantly knew who I was just through some magic Owen skill. And then I killed him as a twin because I didn't know they were twins.
I think one of the things that I really liked was the fact that, so Chris and I would go silent on voice chat while we played because we were both concentrating. And then immediately afterwards, you know, if somebody had been successfully killed, then they would sort of, there would usually be a swear word then followed by, oh, what gave it away? And then we could actually sort of, you know, chat a little bit, and it was actually fun. And if there wasn't, there was a certain amount of, oh, but I don't really want to tell you what you missed out on.
Yeah.
Or, but also sort of starting to get to know a familiar person's style while you were both on the same footing felt genuinely like the more fun way for me of playing that game. I think there will be people who are like, okay, I'm just going to look into exactly how long the AI does this thing for, and I want to know how many times they are likely to pick up a statue so that I can perfectly emulate this. But for me, that's not where the fun of it is. And I think I don't ever want to play, or not ever, but it doesn't strike me that I would have fun playing against people who can do that, because at that point it's just like, well, you will instantly shoot me, so this won't be a fun experience for either of us.
I feel like the game's bizarre multiplayer infrastructure plays against it in this regard. Like, it would be a good fit for a sort of quick match made, kind of just throw me in a game and let me play one and then see how it goes. But because, for better or worse, it has a kind of lobby structure where there's a sort of, unless you're playing with a friend, there's a sort of, I'm not say social pressure, but you've got to kind of choose someone and invite them to play a game with you, which is a level of active participation in the act of matchmaking yourself with a multiplayer opponent that...
It made me anxious.
Yeah, it makes me nervous.
Like, because the community actually seemed really friendly, but I'm just so not used to having easy interactions with people online that I still, like, there was part of me that just didn't want to be in that conversation or that interaction, even if this person was friendly. There's an extra layer of it being daunting that wouldn't be there if, for example, if you and I played Marsh, or if I was playing again with Chris or with Tom.
Like, the absence of that sort of just get me into a game please button feels like.
Because he's partway through, I think, Steam implementations. So I wonder whether that will sort of ameliorate that. Don't know. But yeah, it's such an interesting project, and it's like really pretty at this point, I would say. Because I've seen it at various points along the way, and it's definitely
Although I do love
grey rooms.
the aspects of it that are just so dodgy. Like Toby the bartender, who's just like a kind of like 2 red dots on a beige plank, or the recording of Chris Hecker saying banana bread.
Yeah.
And even like the gunshot, when you actually take the shot, it's like a really low bitrate sample of a sniper.
And also, like, if somebody's body falls, it can fall outside the room. Like, their head is just, floating in space at various points.
I find it fun how many games seem to end in the sniper shooting the wrong person before. So when the spy completes all their objectives, a short timer starts to say, okay, the spy's won unless you know who they are and shoot them now. And quite a lot of games seem to end before that happens with the sniper just shooting the wrong person. Like, they're so sure they don't need to wait for the countdown, and it's just an AI. And it's just fascinating. You can watch an AI for like 10 minutes and just become convinced of their guilt.
Yeah.
It's definitely a human doing wrong. I'm going to kill them.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, the sort of, I think that's why the sort of play with a friend, but don't talk while you're playing, talk afterwards, works really nicely. It kind of feels like, it's very unlike a board game because it's very analog, but it has quite a lot of sort of deception-y board game kind of feel to me, both in terms of sort of like session length, sort of 10 minutes a go, and then you re-rack and try again.
But also, like, it did have that debrief feeling of after, for example, a game of Mysterium, when you're like, okay, Ghost, what the hell were you trying to express with this card? What was that? And then, you can get into it a little bit, which was nice. But also, for me, it was actually a really nice experience as a contrast as well, because I've also been playing Murderous Pursuits, and it's not the same prospect, but there are similarities, and because Murderous Pursuits is a lot of the same people, I think, who made the ship. And so what it is you are at a party on board a ship of some kind, or a thing, a sort of steampunky Victorian-y thing. And there are a lot of AI, and you and, 7 other players are tasked with killing with taking out each other, essentially, to please some person who's hosting this party. So you're all assigned a target, and, you will have somebody who's trying to hunt you down as well. And so it's this thing of like, you have a little radar thing that essentially plays hotter, colder, because it tells you whether you're on the right floor or if they're above or below. And it also goes green if you're facing broadly the right direction. But when they get a certain amount close to you, then that bar just sort of is as big as it's going to get. And so you then have to start narrowing down who amongst the people around you is your target, and sort of trying to figure out who's, behaving in a particular way. So it sounds interesting, and there's kind of promise to it. And I had a decent game of it at the PC Gamer Weekender, but the player base is not there. It peaked at 150 something players, and that's just not been enough to offer me a good experience. Like, I haven't found a single game of it where all 8 of those slots have been humans. The highest I've managed is 5.
Yeah.
And I've tried to play it with the rest of the team, and we did manage to get like a game, which we couldn't quite finish for other reasons. But the thing with it is that it clearly needed an early access period, because some of the abilities don't feel quite right. They don't, because you have 2 active abilities that you can deploy. For example, there's one that you can press to reveal the people around you, so you can tell who's neutral, who's a hunter, who, you know, if they're within a certain distance from you. And there's also stuff like you can throw down a thing that stuns in a range around you, so you can get away, or like you can disguise yourself as a different character and sort of try and throw people off that way. Some of them just seem so powerful compared to others. Like, why would you ever use anything that isn't, or to me it seems like, why would you not have the stun and the reveal options? Because they're like, reveal, like, why would you not? Because the cooldown doesn't seem enough, so you can just use it. But also because there aren't enough human players, you then start to watch out for what the AI, you know, how do you pick out an AI who maybe has been programmed slightly differently from you know, it loses its, that's when the fun just gets punctured, like the potential fun that you could have. But I think in a similar way to what we were saying about Far Cry 5, the experiences don't seem significantly different from game to game either. It is the same core idea that you're all just sort of, you know, playing essentially murder dominoes on a ship. And that's fine, and it could be a fun kind of knockabout if there were enough people there. But it doesn't feel like it I would want to play it for weeks or for whole evenings, or like I'm not sold on it. And also it's 18 quid.
Oh wow, fucking hell.
18 quid for not full games of a thing. And that's the other thing, is like, because maybe you could have really good games when it's 8 friends of yours, but that's nearly 150 quid. And that's,
it's really hard to launch a multiplayer game now, multiplayer only game, unless it's like free to play or there's some sort of...
I think they've said in a blog post that they're looking at, you know, things to do, you know, like, they haven't phrased it in quite that way of like saving things, but trying to figure things out. But it felt like such an obvious candidate for early access for various reasons, for balance reasons, for building a player base, for, you know, all kinds of stuff. And I assume there's a business reason that they did not do that, but you can't ask 18 quid for that experience. It
seems like they keep trying to make this game ever since the ship, right? Because there was one in between too, like Sunset something. Remember that? On a cruise ship?
Yeah, I do.
They also remastered the ship. It was called Remastered, I believe.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Hey, isn't it a cruise ship that doesn't have a sail? Anyway.
You should take that up with them. Maybe they put a mast on it. I don't know.
Probably did well on a steam sail.
Oh, no.
Should we end the podcast forever now?
Yeah. Marsh has returned to kill the thing he created.
I don't know. But yeah, but
That's
so
sad.
as a comparison, it was really interesting to see the prospect of Spy Party through some of those lenses, to sort of, you know, get a sense of how it measures up to what other games are doing in that can you tell a human from an AI sphere.
And being 1v1 gives it an advantage in terms of like,
yeah,
as long as its player base doesn't dry up to one person. As long as there's 2, you're all right.
As long as Chris Heck is still playing.
Yeah. Maybe that's his plan, actually. Just to stay on the servers.
I'll find the one person who likes this idea enough to play it with me for 10 years.
And then kill them just relentlessly because he knows all of the tells.
Well, there's another developer listed, so he's already done that.
Oh, okay.
He's fine. It's a closed system.
Yeah, I know he has an artist. Like, you know, the original shitty art was him, and then the current art is by a professional artist too.
With the exception, presumably, of Toby, the shitty barman.
yeah. Toby's from the old version.
The concept art is just him, a plank with 2 red dots. Like, he nailed it.
I see what you did there.
Shall we do some questions from... Questions, as you once famously said, Marsh.
I did say that. I will also say, I have a question.
Oh.
And it's from myself.
Good God, we tried this once before and it led to success, so no pressure.
I, as many other people did, watched Childish Gambino's This Is America video last week. Or maybe this week. I don't even know.
It was this week.
And it was very good. And it's an incredibly intense art experience. And it has a huge amount of imagery which has been unpacked kind of tediously by Twitter. But also, I mean, I think it is a really startling video work. It's hard to even categorize exactly what it is because it's obviously the imagery is just as important as the things he's saying. But I came away from that as I do many kind of enriching art experiences thinking, if only games, I was wondering, games do a lot of good things, I think, and there are obviously really kind of enriching experiences one gets from games and kind of highbrow intellectual things and even political things, but they all seem to be quite kind of discursive. Papers, Please is a game that the meaning of it is derived over a period of time when you're kind of engaging with systems, and it's Childish Gambino's video is just so kind of literate, but also kind of visceral and immediately engaging. And
it's both dense and arresting.
Yeah, it's 2 minutes long or something like that. I think it is a polemic, right? And I don't know, can games ever do that? Have games done it? I can't think of any.
It's so, and I don't because that video is it's vital in all senses of that word. It feels like, but also I think. Something that I think about a lot with games in terms of maybe why I don't have those experiences in that same way with them is partly because they're so hard to put together. Games, they feel more than anything they've got so many different moving technical parts that I don't know whether it would feel like a luxury to be able to then spend that time on, on all the other things that would go into making it as rich or as sort of dense or as, and over a longer period of time. Because if you put out a 2-minute thing that is anything other than a free to play project, that would be a not sustainable thing for the amount of work that it would take, right?
Yeah.
We once described them as a car full of paintings. And you have to spend a certain amount of time learning to drive the car. And so it can't be that punchy, really. There's going to be an adjustment period. Just how do I even function in this thing and make it do its thing?
And also there's the speed with which you can react. Maybe that amount of time between the idea and the final product, if you want to put anywhere near as much stuff in it, would preclude something as visceral. And I know that's a word that gets bandied around a lot with regard to video games, but it, if it was a thing that would only come out next year, if the production values were there, or if it's,
Games are inherently discursive. It's almost impossible for them to get away from that. Both in the terms of, the fact that the player is almost always embodied in that experience is something I've encountered recently talking to people making VR movies, encountering both filmmaking, philosophy, colliding with game making philosophy. Filmmaking philosophy, the cameraman doesn't exist, or the camera person doesn't exist. In game making philosophy, the camera is a person.
Yeah.
And that's a hugely different thing. And it's particularly pointed if you consider something like the This Is America video, which is directed at the camera. Not every but music videos are a form where actually the camera is addressed more often than in the vast majority of forms of filmmaking. Often music videos happen at the camera. Short of documentary television or most forms of daytime television. There aren't many kind of structured film forms where the camera is so regularly kind of directly addressed. However, in that case, even so, you are not you're being taken on a journey. Music has both the structure of the video, its the method by which it kind of delivers its imagery. It's about what you're perceiving in the moment. It's kind of it's sort of conceit, or not conceit. It's sort of meaning is a lot concealed, and this is one of the reasons it has been so picked over by Twitter is how much it manages to conceal behind other images, like how much it's saying that invites going back and looking again, but how much it distracts you in the moment, and it's about distraction in a big way. It's about your kind of you not having necessarily agency over where you're looking in the moment, how much of a slave to a kind of certain experience you are,
right,
which is very anti-game, basically, functionally. Like,
do you think so, though? I think maybe one of the things that slows down games is the fact that you need to understand how to interact with them, the driving of the car. But I feel like that need for interaction could play the role of, like, the distraction element, like the childish Gambino kind of gambling in the foreground, essentially. You're learning how to do something, but actually you can kind of detect, if you look closely, what the repercussions are or what the... I kind of feel like there must be games that have done this, but the only ones that I can really think of are like the really facile sort of like slap Donald Trump kind of flash games, which aren't in any way subtle and don't really have any of that kind of...
I think maybe the other thing is this habit of having those cinematic sequences in games, because, often, I don't know, like, in the opening segment of Prey, for example, the current one, or more recent one, where, you're sort of going through the initial, I guess, testing chambers, and then, there's the scripted sequence of the things that are happening outside the booth. But, like, games, especially games that need to succeed financially on that scale, feel like they absolutely can't justify to the people higher up while making the game having an effort that isn't the focus. Like, why would you implement that scene if the player isn't looking at it? How do you justify that workload? How do you... And sort of, and this isn't the same point, but something that I wanted to say before I forgot it is that, and I come back to it every now and again, I think games, and I haven't quite worked out why, but games are so bad at expressing anger. Like, I've felt lots of things while playing games, like joy, or, I've laughed at them, I've cried, I've felt various things, but I've never felt that same level of just rage in a game, like expressed or shared by the creators of the game, unless it is a very straightforwardly hateful and not subtle.
Games aren't good at saying sit down and listen, because games typically want to say, like, sit down and listen, please, but if you'd like to get up and stack boxes over there, that's okay. Like, and that's not conducive to polemic in the way that you describe it. Like, like, I was thinking about, like, how I think the closest you're going to get to a music video within games as a medium, at least in this way, is something like 30 Flights of Loving.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good.
Or Gravity Bone, where you're talking about like a vignette. It takes about the same amount of time. But what's interesting about those things is, those experiences is they happen, and then they kind of reoccur in your mind. Like, you go through them at a kind of breakneck pace, particularly 30 Flights of Loving. And then the work of piecing them together and kind of understanding them happens afterwards, when actually steering them is done. So, you could say that 30 Flights is a 10-minute long experience, and I'd say it's probably about half an hour long, and the back 20 minutes is like you making a cup of tea afterwards and trying to, like, figure out what actually happened, or playing it again, or whatever form the figuring it out takes. And that, for me, is quite unlike a very polemic music video or any kind of, like, short, snappy piece of polemic art where the active interpretation is happening dramatically live, right? Like, that's why that sort of piecemeal Twitter analysis is not going to be very satisfying for something like the This Is America video, because actually your experience of watching it is of realizing that something is happening and trying to understand it as it happens, rather than steering your way through it and then piecing it together in your own time afterwards, or that sort of, like, I just feel like video games enforce a sort of slightly more passive form of reception in being more active, if that makes sense. Like, you're always going to be slightly at a remove because you're not at the total mercy of somebody else's vision, necessarily.
Yeah. What was that game? Was it by 2D Boy? The game where you burnt a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, Little Inferno.
I mean, that feels like, I mean, it's a much longer game than it's certainly not a polemic, but I mean, the point of it is that essentially, I don't know, well, it has a purpose in essentially decrying what you're doing throughout the game, but the fundamental act of what you're doing is meant to be so kind of enticing that you don't care.
Yeah.
But then at some point you're meant to also imbibe the greater meaning of it. I don't think it really works, but maybe that's something attempting, flailing for that same sort of gesture.
Games are great transmitters of mood, right? Like, they're not necessarily great transmitters of message. Like, Inside or something is a great kind of mood piece. And it says something about something, but you'd be hard-pressed to pin a particular political philosophy to it.
Brain slugs are bad.
It is bad. Brain slug, it's just not good. Is it?
One of the games I played with the most overt political message backfired in its actual message, which was Sweatshop. Which was a game sort of designed to shine a light on how bad conditions are in sweatshops and make you angry about them and tell you facts about, this really serious, terrible problem. But it put you in charge of the sweatshop. And so you had to manage your production lines and meet quotas and make the safety compromises that that lead to, children getting mutilated on the production line. But because it put you in that role, your sympathy ended up being with the production, with the manager. Like, at the end of it, I thought, shit, it's hard to run a sweatshop. Jesus Christ. I mean, previously I was like, oh, it's terrible conditions in these sweatshops. Now I'm like, man, you don't know the pressures they're under. It's hard to meet these quotas. You basically have to cut corners.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So games, like, as you say, they're good for mood and bad for message. If you have a message in mind and then you put interaction into it, you're just playing with fire. It can go in any direction.
People tend to believe in themselves, right? That's the thing. Yeah. It's like, I'm the put upon party here because it's hard to be me. This is frustrating, all this bombing or whatever it is.
I don't know. I think also, maybe I'm just omitting things from my memory because I know that, because a lot of like really tiny games are very good at just expressing like a short, sharp burst of a mood or an emotion or a sort of like a very sort of jagged feeling. It's more that they can be really complex even if they're really short, because it can sort of be a complicated feeling that it evokes, or, it can be unexpected, or it doesn't quite tie into what you thought would happen, or, all of those different things. And they can sort of provoke you in ways that are really, really close to anger, or that are, but aren't quite the sort of thing that I meant when I was talking about this particular video. But I think maybe there's also a fundamental difference in the vocabulary that we reserve for video games and the spaces in which we allow our general conversations about them to exist, that maybe also colours the reception of them, because, we maybe are in a different mindset or allow them to be only particular things. I don't know.
That's what they're getting us now. I think that's
Good question, Mark.
Sorry, everybody.
Our next question comes from Jake instead of Marsh. And Jake writes, Dear wooden boxes and opening devices, or mostly just Chris. That's a bit of something. Hey guys. So, I was wondering if you had any idea why only certain podcasts seem to work in China. For example, CNC works perfectly, as does the Football Ramble. However, Shut Up and Sit Down, PC Gamer and RPS don't. I was wondering, as cast podders yourselves, if you could provide any insight as to why this would be. Is it a result of hosting or something else? Kindest regards, Jake, he says. He also adds, Mr. Francis, why are digital games so much cheaper out here? Is it simply the result of how much people can be expected to pay for a luxury?
If Steam games are cheap out there, and I don't know myself, but I assume they must be, if he's asking this question, that's probably because Steam have recommended prices for each region. So when you price a game on Steam, you say, I want it to be a $15 game, and then it fills in all the prices in all the other regions. And you can override them if you like, but it has a default price in each, and it's not the equivalent of $15. It's whatever they think the regional price should be. And they price it lower in lower income areas, I think.
Also, although I would add, China's a fascinating market for the reason that if something's on official Steam in China, then it has a Chinese distributor who would be setting the price. So that would actually have nothing to do with what you would set.
Yeah, that's true.
But if it's grey market via Hong Kong, then it probably does go through that system. So the answer is, it's super complicated why things end up cheaper or more expensive in China, actually, because also a lot of stuff is banned. So
I definitely started out with an attitude of like, Gunpoint will be $10 and £6 because that's about what $10 was in those days. And I'm not following Steam's pricing because Steam's pricing was like, I think £8 or something for a $10 game at that time. And I was like, no, it's going to be the dollar equivalent, and I'll do that in all these different territories. And that was like back when there was 5 territories or something. And now there's like, 40. And I've become aware of like actually following the dollar price is really bad for some regions. You completely screw over some people. And so these days I'm just like, okay, there are probably people who know more about this than I do. And I should just go with the defaults.
As for why certain pods may or may not be available, my best guess is it might have something to do with Amazon hosting. Amazon hosting be very popular for a lot of podcasts. We don't use it. So it might be one of the reasons we work and others don't, but I don't know.
I have no insight because I didn't have any say in, like, I didn't do the edit or anything on the RPS podcast. I didn't upload it. I just sent things to Brendan.
So who knows? Next question comes from If Coltrans G. Dear Loot and Health Bar, the level generator in Unexplored feels almost like a person, because like most of us humans, it pretends it has a plan. When has an anonymous game mechanic felt more human than the game's NPCs?
I immediately thought of Desert Golf. Is it Desert Golf or Desert Golfing? I always want to say Desert Golfing, so I think it's Desert Golf because it's not the one I usually think it is. But that was a mobile game that did eventually come to PC, I believe. And the question of whether its levels are random generated or not is an open one. I think it is, it has been established that some of them are not and some of them are. Like, it has a huge number of levels, like more than 1,000, I think. How far did you get, Marsh?
Oh, God knows. I can't remember the number.
You played it a lot.
It felt like thousands and thousands.
Yeah. Like, weird things happen at very high numbers. There is a kind of, I think there's even an end to it, but it's far enough that like 6 months after that game came out, I had not heard of anybody reaching it. So there's a huge number of levels, and they're very, very simple, quick to complete in theory. But it definitely feels like it has a personality. It definitely feels like a person screwing with you. You get to a level, you have a series of easy levels, then you have a hard one, and you feel like it's some human deciding, oh, you've had too easy a time, I'm going to give you this brutal one. And I suspect 95% of those are generated. And the pacing, may have been tweaked by a human at some point, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of occasions there where it's an algorithm, but you read in human intention to it and realize, you think it's screwing you for this particular reason, but actually it's just, a quirk of its generation.
I used to know somebody who took losing at backgammon against a computer opponent really personally, and definitely started to attribute particular like human characteristics like spite to this particular thing. So I guess you could probably call that either an NPC or, a computer system of some other kind. But that became a weird grudge match that one of them was never going to outlive the other. So
we're destined to do this forever, you and I. Our next question comes from Joe, who writes, Hi, for no apparent reason, I was recently looking at the IGF Wikipedia page. It struck me that there's a clear phase prior to about 2004 where I don't know any of these games I don't think I've ever heard of. 2003, Wild Earth. 2002, Bad Milk. 2001, Shattered Galaxy. 2000, Treadmarks. 1999, Fire and Darkness. Even though the IGF Grand Prize is named after the developer of Treadmarks, do you have any memories or thoughts on these games? Whatever happened in 2004, 2005? That's from Joe.
Yeah, I have not played any of these games, but the subject has come up in discussions of the IGF because, it used to be weird. A lot of weird shit used to win the IGF, and the one that came up in particular is Bad Milk, which I have not played, but I heard some stuff about it, and we kind of Googled it quickly in the break to check that it is what I thought it was, which is it's a game largely featuring full motion video. and it starts with you drinking some milk in your fridge that has gone bad, and the rest of it, I guess, is a hallucination of some kind or involves delirious elements, and it's like a room escape type thing. But it is very weird and made with a lot of, I don't know, with an aesthetic I would describe as incongruous and perhaps haphazard at times. And I think these days that kind of game might be, I haven't played it, so, but I imagine it's good if it won the IGF Grand Prize. Like, there must be some merit to it. It's like the IGF, it's not like they didn't have judges back then.
It seems more in the realms of experimental animation, though.
Right, yeah.
The sort of thing you'd encounter late night on Channel 4, you know?
I was going to say it might be a candidate for the Nuovo Award now. But back then it was winning the grand prize. So yeah, I think it's true that the IGF's sort of priorities and values have changed. And
well, there just weren't that many independent games back in, what was it, 2005?
Yeah.
When was Braid? Like that
It won in 2002. Braid was 2006?
7?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, like, that was the birth of the rebirth of the indie game movement, right? Around then. And prior to that, it had pretty much gone. So, I mean, that's maybe why there was some fucking strange shit.
But also, if the IGF was sort of less well known or less well attended, then it would stand to reason, and this is entirely just theorising and making a bunch of assumptions, but it would stand to reason that it was stuff that those people or a particular like group knew of, or that were on the periphery of that and knew how to enter, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. Because you know, I think
I've been there twice, 4 years apart. And it was kind of eye-opening how huge it's got. Like, I got there late, and after I got through like the doors to the hall, and I got to see the size of the hall and how many people were there, I realised, it's going to take me another 2 minutes to get to my table. I'm still not there yet. I need to cross this enormous space.
Plebs like me. None of this table nonsense. It's folding chairs all the way down, Tommy F.
When Marty had a table, why didn't you have a table?
Because I'm poor. And I wasn't working for PC Gamer at the time. Right. I was at RPS. And we hang out at the back.
So I think you're probably right, Marsh, and that might be both a case of like, the selection pool was smaller, so the stuff is going to be weirder, but also just like what an indie game was back then was just a different definition. Indie probably meant arty, and it doesn't so much now. It means, you know, when you think of indie games, I think you kind of think of the really successful ones, which some of them are arty, but a lot of them are just really good games that were made by a small team.
I think as well that, and this is again, like, it's stuff that is based kind of on my own experience and my own rather admittedly awful memory. But I can't really remember at what point people started going to online fully for their coverage of things, you know, because I don't actually know when PC Gamer website started to be, you know, a thing that was well populated and not just a sort of mirror for the magazine, if it, you know.
Or blog on CVG.
But you know what I mean? Yeah. That was a lot of what early websites that were attached to, for example, magazines or things that people had set up, they weren't distribution channels in the same way. And also, I think that the judging for the IGF worked differently, I think, because obviously at this point, you know, people, lots and lots and lots of people sign up because, you know, and there are lots and lots of games to rate, and a lot of those people, you know, are also part of various communities that then can go, oh, that was really interesting, I'd like to talk about it on this platform. It's a very different form of circulation, and it now has hooks into all of these other areas, whereas in like 2004 Steam had only just launched as a platform, right? And also I think there just wasn't that infrastructure of, you know, more mainstream game websites that were A, populated, and B, paying any attention to this stuff. I don't know. That feels like a big part of that puzzle as well.
I have a spectacularly dead leg. I need to point that out. It's Gone.
Maybe you've drunk some bad milk. Maybe this is all a terrible hallucination.
Some bad slow gin.
The fastest gin. Next comes Matthew, who writes, boring, he writes, but mercifully short question. Destiny 2 is extremely cheap on Humble. Is it worth it if I am only interested in the single-player campaign and not multiplayer or DLC? To which I, Chris, the only person here who's played Destiny 2...
I've played some Destiny 2. Thanks. You sat there while I did. How dare you forget this?
Oh, Book of Grudges. Open once again.
Thump.
You spoiled a sea monster for me. Remember? Because I do.
Wounds are fresh.
The answer to this question...
You were like, look over there. There's a sea monster that I found by accident. It was a glorious experience. Look, exactly where I'm pointing.
I was trying to encourage you to have an enjoyable time with Destiny 2.
And how much did I play after that? None.
I don't know if that's my fault. Honestly, normally I would.
If you don't remember,
Simply
I
from
get to
Toad.
write the history book.
Yeah, no. So the answer to this, if you hadn't gathered that already, is yes. I think it's something like $12, $15, $18, more than $10, less than $20 is what I'm saying, on Humble this month, on PC, which I think is very good value for what is, I admire very much. It just had a big expansion, which me and Tom Senior talked about last week.
The Warmind.
The Warmind. The warmest Ind.
But finding single player?
Yeah, well, like, so there's a bit of a sort of, splitting of hairs here with this question, because it's like single player, not multiplayer, or DLC. But it is a multiplayer game. Like, it is an MMO. Like, you need an internet connection to play it. So if that's an issue, then no. Don't buy it. And if you are connected to the internet, then you will experience other players, but not in a way that presses you to do anything. They're not going to.
But if you would actively like to never see another human character in a game, maybe not for you.
Yeah, exactly. So. Like, if you require it to be wholly single player in that you never ever have to even sniff at a connection.
I mean, at that point, have you tried sitting inside a box?
Or playing Mass Effect. Those are the two options. But no, like, if you,
in a box.
like, I think one of Destiny's great strengths traditionally is the way that it glides from single player Halo-y sort of shooter thing into multiplayer sandbox that eats your life, and invited in for, especially for sub $20. Yeah, definitely. Like, that's a very happy 60 hours, and most people were only angry at it because it didn't last 4 million hours. And
neither should it.
And nor should it, indeed. Quite right. Quite right.
It'll outlive us all. I'm obsessed. I can't stop thinking about things that will outlive me.
Oh, God. Did you kill the sea monster?
You can't yet. Expansion 2, Warmind.
Oh, I see. So it will not outlive you.
Really?
There's a big snake, and it's very likely the same one, or related, like a family member.
Oh.
It's not a good scene.
Pip is pulling a face for the listeners.
You don't have to shoot it, though, if you don't buy the season pass.
I don't like questions.
Then you'll be very happy that there's only one left.
Oh, okay.
And it comes from Thomas, who writes, "Hi, Crate and Crowbar carriers. Video game characters lug around a whole bunch of stuff. But what about podcasters? Do you have a small standard loadout, or are you constantly near the encumbrance limit? Cheers." Thomas.
I have a lot of stuff that I apparently need to bring with me everywhere. And I was traveling recently, and on the train on the way back, I always want it to be as empty as possible, and it's always sad if it's at all full. And I got on a seat that I thought I was going to have like 2 seats to myself, and then someone else sat down, and I was so like unreasonably indignant about this. Oh, for fuck's sake, there's another fucking person, and I don't have 2 seats to myself. And the issue is basically that the number of things I need to entertain myself, keep myself happy for an hour and a half from London to Bath, is more than I can reasonably fit around my seat area. And so I have to go to my bag, which is in the luggage rack on top, and fetch things, which is difficult if there's another person there. I have to keep asking them to, like...
What are you doing?
That trombone's not going to play itself.
If I have a drum kit, what is wrong with you?
Look,
Talk me through this.
Okay.
Are you baking a cake?
So item number 1 is a laptop, obviously, on which I will work if I can. And then the power cable for the laptop, which I thought I'd be able to get in-seat power from, but actually I couldn't because it was off, so fuck that. I then have there's not enough room for a mouse, but I have a separate device that's like a wireless trackball thing that I can use as a mouse, and it's great, but you cannot put it anywhere without it rolling off. Like, if you've got it on a table, it rolls off the table. And it can roll under seats. Within 5 minutes
it's just a ball, Tom.
It's virtually a sphere, yeah. Within 5 minutes of getting this train, I was like on my hands and knees crawling under the seat to get at it because it had rolled all the way back to the...
So this is a question.
I think
you
your
sound like the
seat
worst
companion
train
may be
manager.
more indignant about your presence than you were about him by the end of this journey.
This is all the stuff I could bring down with me in one go.
He probably just got off at Didcot Parkway just because he couldn't stand you anymore.
Then I wish he had. And then if I want a nap, I really need the neck pillow that is it's attached to my main suitcase, which is above me. I was jet lagged, so I kind of did want to sleep.
90 minutes, Tom.
You need to be both asleep and fetching a trackball.
Simultaneously working and sleeping, yeah. And then also, I need my headphones, which are noise cancelling, to block out the other human beings, so I don't have to listen to them or think about them at all. And that's partly necessary because I broke the headphone jack on my phone, so I can no longer plug anything into it, so I need Bluetooth headphones to connect to it. The only ones I have are these enormous noise-cancelling ones. And the Kindle, obviously. I don't read anything. I think it's right. I travel light.
I'm going to say you could just install the Kindle app on your phone.
I have to read it on the phone.
Suck it up.
The phone's like barely half the size of the Kindle.
Get a magnifying glass. Those are 2 things.
That would be an extra item that I've got to bring.
Yeah, but you don't need any of the others.
Surely there
what
is
work can you accomplish between your naps?
I got plenty of work done. I didn't get much napping done, but I got work done.
But this is the thing, right? It's an hour and a half.
Surprisingly long time.
No human gets 2 things done in an hour and a half. You get 1 thing done in an hour and a half. And if you're lucky, it takes up the entire hour and a half. And if you're unlucky, you're looking at Twitter for
Well, so this is
minutes,
the thing. When I'm on a train, on my laptop at least, I can't easily access the internet. And so I get loads done in half an hour.
And then you go to sleep.
Yeah, if I can do like half an hour of work, half an hour of sleep, half an hour of work. That's a huge amount of work and a nap.
That's hard. How much of the work, quote unquote, time is given over to finding a trackball?
Only 30% at most.
Very well. That wasn't at all what the question was, but it is an insight that
No,
I'm
he is
glad for.
over encumbered, I would say.
Yeah.
And it has a negative effect on those
That would be
around.
great. Wouldn't that be great? But also, shit, no one should do it if there was like an encumbrance mechanic, because typically over encumbered means you either can't move or you move slowly, right? You're thinking about Elder Scrolls or something. What it doesn't mean is like you've dropped that axe and you sort of forgot that you dropped the axe, and it's like back that way somewhere and you don't even find it.
Or you've got to balance an apple on your coffee.
How bad would that be? But amazing, but terrible. And someone should make this mod for Skyrim, where encumbrance just means that every now and then it pops up a message saying you just dropped something. Or you think you dropped something.
Just hear the noise.
You have to turn around.
It's just like a clattering noise.
Yeah.
It could be anything.
It was nothing.
Or you drop that thing, and in order to pick it up, you need to figure out how to, unbalance all of this other stuff.
Well, like you're
so it
holding a
doesn't
sword and a
then
shield, you
spill.
can't pick that up. Exactly. You're just having a cup, like a potion you want to pick up between your
Or
sword
you
and
end
your
up
shield.
like kicking your axe all the way to like.
Every time you pick up the thing that's going to over-encumber you, you just drop something else randomly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that in
Sprays out
Spelunky.
of you.
You can only carry 1 item in Spelunky, like with your hands. And so if you need 2, I've sometimes just like thrown the other one ahead of me and then brought the first one with me and then picked
Which
up the other
sounds
one.
like you handle being on a train, to be honest.
Yeah,
Tom.
more or less. I throw my laptop at my seat passenger.
Trackball bounces off wherever.
I mean, does anyone else do the thing where if you need to like bring a bunch of stuff from the kitchen to the lounge and it's more than one trip's worth, you still try and kind of balance things on top of each other and take it all at once?
Yeah,
and then you got to open a door and then you... Like,
I've learned that it's better to do 2 trips.
I have learned that and yet never do it. Like, I understand rationally, there's no reason not to do 2 trips. It's not that inconvenient, and yet I will always still set myself the challenge of this can be done in 1 trip. I can definitely stack these things on top of each other.
Yeah. One of the best things that I learned while I was working at Pizza Hut was that trick of like balancing like 3 different plates up your arm. And like, deliver. So essentially you can carry 6 full plates of food to a table.
Awesome.
It's pretty great when it works.
What's in your inventory, Marty?
Pants and a laptop. According to what I brought to Bath with me, probably.
Like shaving a haircut.
I don't over-encumber myself, but I do fortify myself like units in Civilization. So whenever I sit down, because I have a crippling inability to remember anything that's not immediately in my vicinity, I just pile things on top of me, so I can't forget them.
What? What kind of things?
Everything I have. Like pants sit down on a train. Well, not. I don't take them out of my bag and just stack them.
I'm
like
assuming,
they're inside of my bag, but
like
I have to sit underneath
do you mean
all my
that
stuff.
if you ever use the overhead rack, that's that thing gone forever?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
The train owns that now.
It like despawns as far as you can say.
Yeah.
Everyone who's ever left a train at the same time as me has heard me saying, wallet, phone, passport, 2 bags, coat, out loud, or I will forget them.
Yes, Falconboobs. They're all check.
Lionel.
Lionel, Falconboobs. The old mnemonic.
God, you're going to get off a train with so many bits of nonsense from this point onwards. It's like, no, sir, what are you doing?
There's a guy called Lionel and a falcon. If I get that far, it'll be a miracle.
And then you're in prison.
That's just crimes.
Pip, what's in your bag?
Many things.
I know.
My favourite thing is that I don't know. So I'm not tending to be over-encumbered in that I can still lift these things perfectly fine, because otherwise you get to the point where you actually empty it out and find out what the hell it was. But I like being in that sort of grey area of feeling like I have a robust amount of things. I could probably deal with the world, and I'm not going to look too hard at what any of those things are, because it has usually come in useful, because I can just think, I wonder if I've got something for that situation, look through the bag, and then find, I don't know, a teaspoon. I could find a dip dab. I've found porridge in there before. I mean, like there was a time when...
In a container or just loose?
So it was fully made porridge in a pot with a lid, because, so... I think
Was the lid still on?
Yeah. Yes, obviously. No, because the thing is, I swear I've said this before. Maybe it was to someone else while I was trying to explain the same thing. But it was one of those Starbucks porridges where they make it, or they used to make it up for you. You know, they would add the hot milk or whatever it was, and then you'd have to leave it for like an inconvenient number of minutes. And so, because I was carrying a bunch of things, I just put it like carefully in my handbag so that it would stay and like, you know, absorb, and I would have a lovely snack. About 5 hours later, I needed a pen and found surprise porridge that was, you know, perfect but kind of cold by that point.
I don't feel the question of whether the lid is still on is an unreasonable one, given the track record with like things in your handbag and spillages.
But there was an amazing time quite recently where I asked you to get something out of my bag because there was some food in there, or so, I can't remember what it was. And then you just kept holding things up and going, this?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no. It was just this kind of weird, oh yeah, no, I remember that now, which is quite nice.
It's the instinct of the RPG hoarder, right? It's the, I'm going to pick up everything in this level. Doesn't matter if it's a flavour item or not, just like...
But it's so useful. It's so good. Kind of.
You don't like throwing anything away either.
No. I mean, I think at the moment there's a lot of Skittles in there. Because, I mean, a bag of Skittles spilled. And but I like that. I keep them there because now, until they finally run out, I will have a Skittle every now and again. I can just reach in, find a thing that feels like it's shaped like a Skittle, pull that out, try and eat it. It's great. This backfired at least once, but
Is there not like sort of bag scuzz? Isn't there just sort of a substance that accumulates in any container over time?
Skittles are shiny, so they do not accumulate it in the way that, for example, a
Fuzz
soft
resistant.
chew would.
Or porridge.
The hard, scuzz-resistant outer shell of a Skittle makes it ideal bag food.
I did learn my lesson about carrying those little ketchup sachets, though.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, that's not great. That lingers as well. It's
breach under
just
pressure.
Bad. Yeah. Or, a particularly sharp-cornered notebook. Or a business card.
Oh, yeah.
Not great. There are a lot of business cards in there.
There was a
Probably
time when-
mine. I don't know.
I can't take your business card. It might sever the sachet that I'm keeping in my bag.
Introversion once had metal business cards. That would definitely sever a ketchup packet.
My brother had to go to an A&E department once because he cut his hand open on a metal business card.
Oh my god. Holy shit.
Because we were little at the time. Because
Who's giving a child a metal business card?
so okay.
Greetings, toddler.
If
you ever need to call me.
Dad.
Your
You want to circle back around on this and go up on a quick call?
So it was from my dad, I believe. But it was because my dad used to go to a paper supplies conference.
with a metal business card. That's a bit on the nose.
You're a traitor to your industry.
He didn't work in the paper industry. So
Evidently.
quite why any of this happened. But it used to be a great day of the year because he used to come home with all of these paper samples, and me and my brother and sister would take it in turns to pick out exciting samples, and some of them were business cards.
I liked Power Rangers.
Why is this sounding so weird now that I come to say it out loud?
I know, we all had a paper samples day as a kid.
Anyway.
The day before Christmas, right?
Anyway, one of them was, a fun-looking, kind of, I think it was had a holographic-y kind of effect on it. Business card, but made of metal. And my brother was just playing with it, and he managed to slice his hand open sort of on the pad at the top between your thumb and your forefinger. And I remember him showing me, and we were both really interested because you could see the layer of fat.
Oh my God.
In your hand. And we were both fascinated, but my parents took him to A&E. Anyway, in
Video
conclusion.
games.
I hope that answered your question, Thomas.
And if it raised more, you can't ask them until next week, so that's fine. I might take that one off, tactically.
If you'd like to send us a question.
Or paper sample.
Papers,
I don't
please.
live with those two anymore, so I
Metal,
don't
no
have to share.
thanks. If you'd like to send us a question for an episode of The Crate and Crowbar, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. Actually, Marsh, do you want to do this?
I don't think I can.
Really?
I really don't think I can. It's been too long, and also I'm a bit drunk.
Okay. If you'd like to hang out with our community, you can do so on Discord, the link for which is on our website at crateandcrowbar.com, which is also where you'll find show notes for this very episode. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/crateandcrowbar, and as ever, this podcast and its spin-offs are supported by our Patreon, which you can find out more details of at patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. You can find us on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar, and you can find us individually on Twitter. I'm at C Thurston, which is CTHURSTEN. Pip.
I'm at Philippa War, which is PHILIPPAWAR.
Tom.
I'm Pentanact at PENTADHD.
Marsh.
It's Marsh Davis. DAVIES.
Thanks for living, everybody!